All right. Is it time?
It is.
It's time.
It is. Well, good evening. We are so excited to be here today. We are going to go ahead and just kick this off. Thank you for joining us today here for exploring the power of homeschool pods. And we're going to be talking about how we are constructing high impact learning communities. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. So our presentation should be about like 45 minutes or so, with about 15 minutes for Q&A. There is an option at the bottom of your screen to be able to ask a couple of questions while we're speaking. Nate and Annelise will be perusing through those questions to see if they can answer anything while we're speaking, if they're like quick. But if it's something that maybe requires a longer response, then we'll leave that towards the end. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in because we do have a ton to cover. So a little bit about how tonight's going to flow. We're going to first speak a little bit about who we are, how we got here, how did we start these homeschool pods, why we feel like pod learning is just so effective and a really good alternative model. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the goals, the outcomes that we look for our students. It's really the forefront of our model. Then we're going to go into those myths and realities, lots of those questions that we get from parents and concerns. We're going to briefly touch on the curriculum and how we track growth and those progress reports. And then towards the end, it'll just be some frequently asked questions to see if it's really a right fit for your child, any other questions that you may all have, and then a little bit of the ways that you can get in contact with us if this is truly a good fit for you and your family. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off to Annelise to start off the who we are.
Hi, everyone. So a little bit about us and why we are here. My name is Annelise. I've been teaching for about 8 years, and I love it. So the reason why I'm here, it goes all the way back to when I graduated college. When I graduated, I had this vision of what schools could look like. I remember learning about these new researches on how to students learn best about the history of education and about things that schools were implementing around the world to transform education. Quickly after I started teaching, I realized that we were not implementing these things and that we were simply outdated. And I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about the methods that we were using and what we were prioritizing in education. I had the opportunity to work at two really well-known schools, one in Miami and one in Puerto Rico, and I learned a lot. But even still in these really good schools, I felt like my students just had a lot of more potential to give, but they were limited by the system. That led me to look more into alternative education. I knew that there were other systems that had similar vision of when I graduated university. And that's when I decided to do my 4-school certification. I wanted to bring a more holistic approach to my classroom. Little after that, Miss Ilana told me that she had her homeschool pod. And that was like a dream for me. I had heard about homeschool pods before, but I didn't know that they existed here in Puerto Rico. So we sat together. We had a very similar vision. We wanted to create something that was very student-centered. And that's why I'm here. I truly believe that kids are capable of doing much more than we often give them credit for. And I want to help them discover that.
Thank you, Annelise. So I'm Ilana Echevarria-Stewart, and I've spent the last 13 years working in education from international schools, traditional schools, and this last year I've been leading a homeschool pod. So while my career began in like a traditional institution, my like aha moment came as a mom. So I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I want to kind of share a little story about where the foundation of this work really comes from. So my eldest daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia at the end of 2nd grade, but I had spent years before that advocating for her, only to be repeatedly told, no, she's fine, she'll eventually catch up. And I could see that this anxiety was building. By the time I had finally secured that support to have her evaluated, well, she was entering 3rd grade and she had dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. And I saw this super neurodiverse student who had so much potential to give. And she was just so anxious about school, felt like she couldn't learn. And I was just really disappointed that I felt that the traditional model had really let us down, me as an educator and as a mother, and her as a student. So that's kind of when I realized that even in the best schools, and there's really wonderful schools here on the island, and I've worked in a few of them, that the system often struggles to meet the social, the emotional, and the academic needs of our child simultaneously. Like that just doesn't happen. So I decided to take action into my own hands. I got certified in evidence-based methodologies for both literacy and math, and decided that it was time to pull both of my daughters out of the traditional method and create this homeschool pod. I was so fortunate to find some other families that were kind of in similar predicaments where they had just arrived to the island and weren't able to find placement for their children. And so we started this learning community, and it's been amazing. I've seen all the students thriving academically, socially, emotionally. My daughter, who was very, very behind, has not only caught up, but has superseded like where she's supposed to be in lots of areas of literacy. And now we're working on that math. And it's just been transformative. And so because of that information, I shared that with Annelise, and we've worked together prior to this. So we've known each other for quite some time, and it just seemed like a really good fit to have Annelise working with those younger elementary students, me working with upper elementary, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to Nate Stewart, and he's gonna tell you a little bit about his middle school experience and how he's also joined this really awesome team.
Thanks, Ilana. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so I mean, Ilana, I think you're being kind of humble there. You should take a little more credit because you're the one who kind of blazed the trail, at least in our local community, for setting up a pod. And then you worked in that pod for a while, and then I started seeing how powerful it was. And basically, I'm more of like a middle grade specialist, right? Middle grades and then up into early high school. That's really where the majority of my professional experience comes from. I've been a teacher for 17 years and a little bit more. And most recently, I was like the basically kind of dean of students / assistant principal. It's a British school that in Bogota, Colombia. And so it has a little bit different names for things, but that was essentially my role where I was most recently before working in the pods that I'm currently managing. And Ilana, like, seeing the power of this model and how it was transforming like our girls' lives plus other students' lives. It was just like I was very much sold. And at the time, I had kind of left education to work in the finance department for some personal reasons. I wanted to see what else I could do. And then that became kind of difficult for other reasons. And then I just saw that there's just a load of potential with the pod model. And that's when I decided to follow Ilana's lead and open up a couple pods of my own. I have 2 like STEAM pods, so like science, technology, engineering, art, and math pods going right now, plus a core subjects pod that I'm looking to grow as well. And it's just been really cool, the experiences with students and things like that. And so, yeah, that's kind of my journey. I do want to also mention that Ilana and I are married. So it's not a coincidence that her second last name there, the hyphen after the hyphen, is the same as mine. We've been together going or a little over 20 years, and we have 2 daughters. And most recently, they were in Ilana's pod. Now one is moving up, going to be in my pod with me, and they've been in STEAM pods and stuff. And Annelise was the teacher for our youngest daughter as well when we were back in traditional school, right? So this is kind of how we all kind of met. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. But mainly, I'm just psyched to be here and talking about this model. Again, I want to be clear. I put it in a little chat a moment ago. This is not a sales pitch. Like, we don't have anything to sell, really. I mean, we have services that we could potentially offer to somebody, but like whether you go with us or somebody else and figure it out another way, we just wanted to share what we've been seeing that's been transformative in our children's lives, our students' lives, and then in our lives as professionally. it's a game changer. So that's pretty much what we're here to talk to everybody tonight. So it's awesome to see that we have a bunch of attendees. This is great, and some familiar names. Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, very exciting.
So I think that's you, Nate.
Yeah, that's me. So, what the heck is a homeschool pod anyway? So, really, in brief, it's essentially like a middle ground between traditional school and solo homeschooling. So, a pod is just like a small, intentional student group that's led by professional teachers, right? So, to juxtapose that with traditional schooling, that's where, obviously, you're going to have like, it's highly structured. You're going to have bigger groups of kids. That the age of the student determines where they go, rather than like the stage that they're at in their learning. That's very often the case, is that how old they are determines where they go. Traditional schools, we would know, I think most of us probably would have grown up in a traditional setting. I certainly did. Public schools in Florida is where I was brought up. But they're minimally flexible, right? They literally tell students and teachers and everybody like to the minute where you have to be and what you're supposed to be doing. They can generate a lot of stress if they're kind of high stakes. Kids are getting grades and homework, and there's reports, and there's a lot going on, right? Schools are kind of like, we used to say working in schools, it's like organizing chaos. So that can come with a lot of stress, and it can be a very high cost, especially here on the island. If you're new to the island, or if you've been here a long time, you'd know that the private schools here, they're not cheap, right? They do have, the tuition of a private school can be challenging for some families. And then the quality sometimes that we get from a traditional school, like the actual learning academically, and then the holistic development of the kids, can be kind of a low quality in a traditional school. And then all the way, if we go to the other side of the spectrum here, solo homeschooling, obviously that model is probably best described by like a parent who is dedicating themselves to the education and the development of their own child, right? That's the most common thing. Obviously, benefit is that it's going to be maximally flexible, right? If you want to not have school a day, or go in whatever order you want, or end early, or whatever the case might be, it's completely flexible. It's whatever the parent wants to do, however they want to do it. But the flip side of that is that the full responsibility of the learning and development of the child academically, especially because obviously, we already have that responsibility of, the social and emotional development of our kids, but the academic thing is your full burden. And the social dimension part of solo homeschooling can be a challenge. This is especially true, for kids who, the homeschool model that they're in, maybe it's not even a parent that's there with them teaching, but they might be like connected to a teacher, or they're connected to a program online, something like that. So the social aspect can be challenging for those kids and those families in the solo homeschooling model. And then it can be, what we tend to see is that it's like a low level of rigor, especially as you get to the later part of primary school, up into middle school, and then up into high school. The rigor and like how deep a student's learning can be in these academic areas, especially, that's challenging, right? That can be really challenging for a parent who may themselves not be a professional educator, though I see some professional educators here I know, that are also parents in our attendee list. But still, like, when they're your own kids, it can be challenging, right? Especially as they're getting older, and they're looking to like branch out and go and explore and have new experiences. Being a parent who's solo homeschooling, that has some challenges. So the homeschool pod model kind of takes the best of both of these. And what we see is that it's a small peer group, right? So we're talking like, I feel like the sweet spot is probably like around 6 to 8 kids. Clearly it could be bigger, but like we've been having a lot of success with 6, and I have a couple pods with 10, but those are for like, more like focused time. But I'd say like, that's about the group size that we're talking about. They allow for custom pacing for each kid in each subject every single day. And so it's not just like, oh, how old are you? Okay, you're going to do this. And how old are you? It's not like that. It's, as we say, it's stage, not age, right? And we get maximum engagement with this, is because one of the things that's really nice, especially for the developing young minds, is that they're really sensitive and attuned to the attitudes and the feelings of other kids their age. And we get to, kind of use that as a springboard to help build. That's a built-in natural incentive that kids have, is that like, oh, these other kids, they see other kids doing stuff. There's like, we each have this, but in a school setting, in an educational context, that we can use that as in a positive way for some really big, help for the kids learning. And then, there's constant feedback, which I'm going to say a little bit more here about in a minute. It's highly flexible still, and it's really low stress. Like that's what we're really seeing when we ask kids and ask students, so how do you like this, as opposed to like, traditional school. They just are like, I feel, way less stress. One kid said, I feel seen, which was like, that was a powerful one. So that's kind of what the Homeschool Pod is about. It's really similar to solo homeschooling, except it's directed by a professional educator, and it's in a group setting, oftentimes like in-person group setting. So that's kind of what the Homeschool Pod is. And I think that if I could call it like the secret sauce of the Homeschool Pod, like why does it work so well and why are we seeing these results, which we'll share in a bit, I would say it's because of the nature of the feedback. The level of feedback is just like, it's almost impossible to achieve this level of feedback in a traditional setting. And here's what I mean. That, in a traditional school, students, it's very common for them to work on an assignment or work on a project or on a unit for a week, 2-3 weeks. They turn in their work. The teacher has, they get like after the deadline, a teacher's going to get a whole giant pile of work. It's going to take them time to go through and grade it and do that. And then what the students is going to get is, like a letter grade. Maybe they get, like a percentage out of 100. Maybe if the teacher's really going the extra mile, they're going to put like some comments of like, great job, oops, or, maybe even detailed comments if they're really going above and beyond. But this feedback and this information is coming way late. Like we're talking, minimum a week or days, or, like that's typically the turnaround time. Haven't been a teacher in traditional schools, like trying my best to get the students their grades really quickly, but it's coming. That's like the nature of the feedback, right? It's a letter or a percentage or maybe some minimal comments. And also like assignment grades and these kinds of things generate, as we all probably remember or we see in children, it's very stressful. Right? Getting the feedback is like, what's my grade going to be? I hope I do well on the test. Oh my gosh, I worked really hard on this. I hope I get a good grade. And then you get the grade like days or even weeks later. And this just leads to really poor outcomes. We're stressing people out and kids out about the one critical thing they need to learn, which is feedback, right? Like imagine learning how to do anything. I think that my favorite analogy is like learning how to hit a baseball. Imagine that you step up to the plate, the pitch comes, you swing at it, and a week later you find out with a letter, a single letter grade from your coach, like how you did at the plate. It's like you're not gonna get good at hitting a ball. You need reps. You need it to be a space where you're okay to miss the ball, to fail, or to hit a home run, whatever the case might be. But like that's how feedback is supposed to be for learning literally anything. And so in the pod model, like it's possible too I want to say in the solo homeschooling model, but in the pod model, we get like an extra little bit of a bump in effectiveness, I think, because it's social, right? And so that like human beings, we're naturally a little bit competitive. Obviously, we don't make all of these different activities that we're doing in pods competitive. That's not the idea, but feedback is immediate. It's woven into every activity that we do. It's not weeks late. It's not stressful. And if students hit a wall or they're not getting something, no problem. We stay on it until they get it, right? And another thing is that this builds in for kids a healthier relationship with difficulty, right? It makes them more resilient, that they know that they can struggle and that that's okay, and not getting it right away is not the end of the world. It doesn't blow up your GPA. You're not a failure and you have to go home and your parents are going to be mad. It's none of that. It's like, well, let's just stay on it until you get it. And we do. And it's transformative, I think. And then it's when kids get competence in these skills that they gain confidence for themselves, right? And it's genuine confidence. We earn it by doing these hard things, not just being told, you did great a week ago, kiddo. Okay, next thing. So that's, I think, really powerful. And then there's next to zero performance anxiety, right? It's because there's not like a high stake grade coming at the end of the assignment or, whatever. Like we do build in the healthy amounts of stress, right? Is like doing when a student has to get up in front of their group and present, and we're going to invite parents, and we're going to invite community leaders as well. Like we're going to really drive up the stakes. that can be stressful, right? Like public speaking can be a little bit stressful. So we want to be sure and mention that we build in healthy, good amounts of risk, healthy, good amounts of stress, things that like kids' brains are expecting to get while they're developing and growing. But I think that the feedback is what really, the quality, the frequency, just all of that, and that they're getting social feedback as well. I think that's the really secret ingredient.
For sure. So if, so success, like just to kind of piggyback on what Nate's saying, the success in our pods looks different than a traditional like teach to test model, right? Because we are prioritizing the learning process. We want to make sure that we're fostering children that are confident, that they're curious, that they're capable problem solvers. So we all recognize that we're preparing students and children for a rapidly shifting world. We don't know what's coming, right? And so what is our job? Our job is to equip them with the tools to be able to navigate new information, to be able to ask meaningful questions, and to be able to solve problems that they've never encountered before, right? AI, because we know AI, right? That's what we're all talking about. That's what we all see. We know that AI is really good at solving problems, but they don't identify the problems. So, you know, helping our students be able to be observant, to be able to be, like Nate says, like that social sensitivity is really, really important. It's like those soft skills that are becoming so important for the future. And so everything that we do in our pods in the forefront is like these three core pillars. It's academic fluency, right? We want our students to master those foundational literacy and math skills through very intentional instruction. There is not rote memorization here. We're not going to have them memorize something just for the sake of memorizing it, right? We want them, it's really deep conceptual understanding. And that 1st through 4th grade, we're really delving into those foundational skills. So for example, in a pod like mine and Annelise, we're really going to be working on a lot of that multiplication and fractions and measurement. And we're going to do some hands-on work as well, but it's nothing compared to what is happening in Nate's middle school pods, where that critical thinking is really coming to life, where they're taking all of that knowledge, all of that foundational skills that they have, and they're applying it to problems, not problems that you know, like that Annelise and I would be giving our students, because we're still guiding them and teaching them. These, Nate, it's a little bit different. Like they have to identify the problem and they have to figure out how to apply the knowledge to be able to answer these questions or to do something physical, tangible, right? And then the last part of those three core pillars is that social emotional resiliency. Like Nate already mentioned, confidence comes from competence. And the only way that you get competence is by practice. And the only way that you do practice is by getting feedback and failing forward. I like it when my students fail. It's okay, right? It's through trial and error is how they learn. And so when you have these three things and you know, we're really architecting this like very individualized experience for each child that's truly going to prepare them for the future.
Don't sell yourself short either. I mean, I feel like y'all bring in really cool projects and things that gives kids, the younger ones too, like the opportunities to, you know, to take their concepts and apply it. Because I think that that shift of like, okay, I learned the concept this way, now let me apply it in like a novel context. I think that is really powerful. But obviously with the little ones too, you know, they're just learning kind of those basics, but you guys still come up with like
there's more guidance right there, where it's with you, it's a little bit more like, all right, what are you bringing to the table today? Like, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? So, but yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Annelise, go ahead.
Okay, so some homeschool pods, myths versus reality. A myth that we hear a lot is that the education isn't academically rigorous. Rigorous academic doesn't come from the location. Okay, we can have rigorous academic in a classroom setting, in our home, or outdoors, because it truly just comes from setting high expectations. And it is easier to do this when we have less kids, because we get to know the student better. What are they struggling with? What are their strengths? And when we have less students, we're able to keep those high expectations, but also provide that support that they need. when we have a classroom with a lot of students, oftentimes what the teacher needs to do is they throw a line, okay, most students are struggling with this, so this is what I'm going to support them with. So it's not that individualized. And then another myth that we hear a lot is that children don't socialize. This misconception comes from homeschooling. In homeschooling, you may have one student or more, but they're usually siblings. In homeschool pods, you're going to have different students from different families and different backgrounds. So within our own pods, we're creating our own community, and also across our 3 pods, because we do a lot of activities and field trips together. And that way, they can also meet students from different ages. Our last myth is that children will have a hard time integrating themselves in the real world, like Ilana was mentioning. So academics alone is not going to prepare them for the real world in this ever-changing world where we don't know what jobs we're going to have in a couple of years. And a lot of the things that we're learning in school, AI is going to be used for that. So we want to have skills that no matter what happens in the future, they're still going to be useful. So for example, the critical thinking skills, the social skills, adaptability, and confidence. And the way that we prepare these students with these skills is by purposely putting them out there, letting them fail, but then guiding them. The more exposure that they have in the real world with these skills, the better that they're going to do in the future.
Yes.
Well said.
Better,
Well
yeah.
said.
So
I want to. One thing I do want to give credit where credit's due is that with the social aspect for homeschools, I've now getting acquainted and getting into the homeschool community here in Puerto Rico. I'm really been like pleasantly surprised and really impressed and proud of a lot of the families that we've met, that they go above. I mean, they're constantly looking for opportunities for their kids to socialize and to spice it up and do those things. I'm talking about those solo homeschooling parents that are always, linking up. There's never been there's a really vibrant network, especially in Dorado, where they're constantly networking. But the fact of the matter is too, yeah, like you said, Annelise, really well, is that having multiple kids in the same room in the academic setting is can be really powerful. You said it really well.
Yeah.
Okay, so our curriculum goes from 1st to 8th grade, and we keep the same vision instruction throughout. For math, we use Singapore math. For language arts, we use science of reading and a lot of public speaking. And in science and social studies, it is inspired by IB. In Spanish, we do a lot of dialogue and expose them to cultural language experiences in the community. So how does it look like throughout the years? For the younger ones, we focus more on building those foundational skills. Like Ilana said, they need to know how to add, how to multiply, how to read, and how to write. But here, what we really focus on is doing it in a way that they know how to apply it to the real life. It is practical, not in isolation, because all the schools have access to the standards, right? But what's going to change the education is not that we're checking off those standards, is the way that we are teaching these standards. We want to make it in a way that they feel like they need to use that skill. So I'm going to talk here about an example. If you look at the picture for science and social studies, we were doing a unit in economic, and I told my students that we were going to be doing a selling. So they had to create their own business and their own product, and they were all super excited. And when they doing their flyers, they started asking questions like, wait, is 75 cents more or less than $1? How much should I charge this for? So they had no conception of money. And so that was perfect. So, okay, this is our problem. How are we going to solve it? Oh, well, we need to learn about money. So that was our introduction for the money unit in math. And the students were super involved in it because they wanted to master that skill so that they could use it in their business.
Just to piggyback on what Annelise was saying too, there is that, like Annelise was explaining how the science and social studies led to math. That's what we try to do on a daily basis with all of the subjects to make it cross-curricular, right? So that all the things kind of are melded together, where you're not really sure, are we doing science, are we doing language, are we doing math? Because it flows so well. and the student sees like, oh, well, I need to know how to write this properly with the correct grammar, and I need to know how to add and do the money, but I need to know a little bit more about economics and all these different
Like
things.
the real world.
Just
like the real world.
So they bring it together. And often in our experience, when we do it like this, they don't want to stop. Like that we'll be like, okay, day's over. And they're like, no, I'm not done with my project. Or there's a holiday on a Monday and they'll be like, no, we don't need the holiday. Like we want to continue to come to school. I never experienced that in a traditional setting where kids on a day off would be like, can you come still? So it shows that when they feel like they're able to apply it to their daily life, they just like, they soak it up. It's just amazing and it's beautiful. So sorry, Annelise, I think I cut you off there.
Okay, and then as the kids grow older, they're still building on those foundational skills and meeting the objectives that they have for their grades. But now they have more space to start exploring the things that they like and what they're good at. And so here the teacher becomes more like a mentor that guides them through their path. Just like Ilana was mentioning earlier, how the older kids, they have a little bit more say in what they want to learn because they have already mastered those fundamental skills.
If I can just add there, I think like you said, that we're looking for, what are the natural aptitudes that kids have in the pod school system, like in the solo homeschooling system. We can take, every kid has gifts. They're good at things that don't necessarily fit into an academic box. Like Ilana and I were just talking about a student yesterday who her gift is just her warmth, her ability to literally set a vibe of wherever she goes. She's super non-judgmental. I'm talking about like a middle school age kid that wherever she goes, she's sunshine and she's lovely. And like, that's a gift that there might have many practical applications for in her life, but she might not ever get told that, right? If she's in a traditional setting. And so like being able to, as they grow up, let's lean in on their gifts and use that as like a natural and intrinsic thing, because nobody learns anything unless we need it. And so like my favorite example, because and Annelise, sorry, I know that you're a Spanish teacher, but what are the names of the I literally failed Spanish in college. It messed up my GPA. It was a whole thing. I failed Spanish. The joke's on them, porque ahora soy bilingüe y no tengo que saber lo que son esos acentos. Like, I'm sure that it's important. I'm sorry.
It is important.
I know that there's another Spanish teacher in the.
Annelise is a Spanish teacher. So.
I'm going to hear about it. I hope I hear about it. I would like someone to explain to me, like, why is that like a necessary thing? Because
spelling, like, it's going to help you spell.
Yeah.
You know what also helps me spell? Is like the little squiggly lines and everything. No, I get it. It's true. It's one thing to know it. And there is things, but like you said really well, Annelise, and I love how you put it, is that like these things we're looking for, like to make the learning practical for the kids in their life. Like that's where it's about. That's when it really gets internalized, is when they see a use for this information, whether they're in first grade or eighth grade or anywhere in between. Yeah, definitely.
So, what does a day look like, right? This is a question that I often get asked by parents who are considering trying out a homeschool pod. And so it's a rhythm. It's not a routine, right? So we start our day every day with community circle. It's really important to start the day with intention. We define our goals. We use an agenda where we write the day's goals, the week's goals, and not just academic goals, but social goals, chores that we have to do in our house, things or hobbies that we want to get better at. And so we write those out. We revisit them every morning to make sure that that we're accomplishing those goals. And if we're not, then why? Why hasn't it become a habit? Like, what is it that we need to do? How are we going to have it stacked so that we can be successful in the things that we want to do? Additionally, we use that time to kind of like start waking up the brain. So we'll do some brain teasers, we'll do riddles, and then we'll talk about current events. We'll watch some different news segments that are nonpartisan that give us that, these kind of like little tiny bites of current events specifically for this age range, for this age group from 1st to 8th grade. And we get into some really deep and interesting conversations that connect to what we're learning. So that's how we start our day. At the end of the day, we also have kind of a regroup. How did the day go? What's coming tomorrow? And then we have those snacks and lunch breaks, always that student-led time where they can play, where they can go outside and run, or they can use it to be active. And so that's kind of how we start and end. But what's the meat and potatoes of our day? So the day can look very different depending on where we are. So we have some deep work blocks where it's this uninterrupted time that we're really focusing on academic instruction. At this point, usually in math, most kids in math, we usually have some that are together, but a lot of kids are usually kind of on their own track. So that's where I'm working individually, and Nate's working, and Annelise is working individually with each student. And then there's times where we come together and we're learning these new concepts. And that day can flow. Sometimes we start with math, and then another day we start with language. It depends on what it is that the kids want to start with the day as well. Because we also allow the students to decide how they kind of want their day to go. Of course, if they're like, oh, we want to play puzzles all day long or make a puzzle all day long, it's like, cool, but no, that's what you're going to do in your student-led time. But we're guiding them. We want to give them an opportunity for them to be the creator of their time, for them to decide how they're going to use their time. We often see that kids from kinder all the way until senior year, they're told where they need to be at what time by a bell or by a parent, and then they graduate and they go off into the new world, and it's like, now what? Now, how do I structure my time? How do I structure my day, right? So we do that at a very young age so that the students are practicing this for those future opportunities that they're going to have to be able to know how to organize their work and play and all these different things. And then we have a lot of experiential discovery, a ton of it, right? Lots of hands-on projects, lots of field trips, where we're connecting to the real world. You can kind of see there in one of the pictures, 3 of my students, we were working on ecosystems, and we spent one day or a couple days actually really delving into what is a consumer, what is a producer, what is a decomposer, and like learning the vocabulary and understanding how it works. And then we went out to the community pond and made our own ecosystem, and then brought it into the house. And every day we were checking, and you would see the bubbles, and they would be like, oh my gosh, there's photosynthesis happening inside of my jar. And so that is like, now that's in there forever because it was so hands-on. And then also having those passion projects like Nate was saying. You can see it here. There's another little picture of one of the students who, she's a gymnast, and she would constantly complain about, every night at practice, my bag just gets full of chalk. And I said, well, that seems like a problem that we can find a solution to. And so we did some research, and she realized that, what if I made a cream that had chalk? And I was like, okay, well, let's do some research. And we figured out that there is such thing. And she started tinkering with chalk and alcohol and mixing it in essential oils. And she came up with her own little chalk cream. She called it garantista for, because it's, tisa for Spanish. Yeah, and so, yeah, which is great because she goes to a bilingual gym. And the little girl, she sold 4 bottles in her gym. And everybody was like, this is amazing. And so with that, we were able, like Annelise said, we really talked about like proportions of like, well, we had to mill and grind a lot of chalk before we could figure out the correct proportions. And then when it was time to sell, it was like, well, how much do I sell it for to make a profit? And so there was a lot of going back and tracking materials and adding and deciding like, well, what percentage do I want? She's a 3rd grader. We haven't talked about percentages, but it was already like a natural way to start introducing the concept. So our day is a mixture of this. There's days where it's mostly deep work blocks for all the subjects. There's days where it's a combination between some deep work blocks and then going out. There's days where we're outside the whole day on a field trip with the other pods, like really getting into the community and meeting those community leaders and applying what they're learning on a day-to-day.
I just want to take a quick second and remind our attendees that I see that there's a hand raised. We're happy to take questions. Please, I think at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a computer, maybe even on a phone, there should be a looks like a word bubble with a question mark in it. That's where the Q&A is. So if you have a question, we'd love to take them. I think we said it at the top, but I've seen some other people jump in here. So I just want to let you know, if you put any of those questions in there, we'll do our best to address them by the end of the webinar. Thank you.
All right, and so then we're going to go here on how we track growth. So I often, and we all do, right? We often get asked, this is a very big concern, is like, okay, so, but how do we track the progress? Like, how do I know that my child is actually growing? So we rely on super, super robust data-driven information for each student. So we combine formal computer adaptive assessments like the NWEA MAP assessment that we do 3 times a year. So we'll do that at the beginning of the year, very, very early in the beginning of the year, and then again in the middle of the year and at the end. This assessment is used by over 14 million students in the world in over 146 countries. So it is really meaningful data where we're able to see where our students are in the international setting. Not only does it allow us to see where they are, but it gives us a very, very detailed report that we use to map the best path for each child. So we're not guessing in any moment, right? We are using data the entire time. And so if the results show that a student who's a 5th grader is ready for 6th grade geometry, well, that's what we're going to do. We're not bound by, oh, well, they're in 5th grade, or, oh, they're only 10. No, they're ready. They have those skills. They have the foundations. Well, let's go. And if that same student also shows they're in 5th grade, but their vocabulary is still in a 4th grade level, so we need to be working on that, perfect. So then that's where we start, and then we push them to their full potential. Additionally, we provide a twice a year, semesterly, we will provide an academic progress report. Again, incredibly detailed. It is by skill mastery. So for every single skill that they see with us, they will get a performance key, whether it's E, that they're exceeding that expectation, M, they're meeting that expectation, D, they're developing it, or I, it's being introduced and we're still working on it. And then when we do our first progress report in December, and you see it again at the end of the year, those skills don't just disappear, right? If the student was developing, well, you're going to see them in the second progress report because we're either still developing it, or we met it, or they exceeded it. It's not like in traditional schools, like, tick, well, we did that, we can't go back, so now it's whatever is on the next part of the semester. Well, that's not what we do here, right? We want to make sure that there is deep conceptual understanding, and we are not going to move forward. Obviously, we're not going to bore them, right? We're not going to be like drilling it until they get it. We are going to drill it, but it's going to be in a very applicable way where they're going to get the practice that they need to be successful. Additionally, we also create a very thick, it's big, portfolio where the students are putting in throughout the entire year, every single project that we do, every single public speaking that we do. We'll take pictures, we'll do a reflection, we'll put them in the portfolio. We do math tests because it's a good way to kind of see if their conceptual understanding is at that 80% before we move on to the next concept. But again, low stress, they do it. Right after they do it, we sit down, we check it together. And then we see like, okay, well, what did we get wrong and why? Was that a mistake? Was that a comprehension mistake? We know how to do the math, but I just read it incorrectly. And so all of that is in this really nice portfolio that's divided by sections, that by the end of the year, the students have a lot of data, objective data that's intentionally driving every single lesson plan. And because of this, our results really do speak for themselves. And so does it work? It works, right?
Work.
These are different skills. This is an example of what that MAP assessment looks like. This is where all of my students started, and some of Nate's as well there, right? And so you can see that a lot of them are in average areas, right? They were doing good. They were middle of the pack. They were doing well. But by the end of the year, they were above average, right? Because they're being pushed, they're being challenged, but they're also really happy, right? So they're not feeling this like stress of like, oh, there's maps. It's actually quite the opposite. Map days comes, and it's a whole week of map testing that we do. We prepare them and they know it's coming, and they kind of get like excited because they're like, I want to show everything I've learned. And they will take the test, and afterwards, we usually get kind of like a raw score. And as soon as we get the raw score, they run over to the computer and they're like, what did I get? What did I get? What was it last one? What did it compare to last one? And then they start like looking at the difference of, the data, which is great. They're taking that, initiative to know where they're at and where they want to go. So
if I can just jump in there, Ilana,
yeah,
that right there is like a really key sign that kids are internalizing, that they're intrinsically motivated for their learning, is that they want to be able to show what they know, and that they feel good, like, getting an opportunity to show it. And that's what the MAP test allows us. In addition, it gives us a ton of data. I mean, like the report literally for each kid at the end is like 60 to 70 pages long. And that's what we use on the educational side, driving the pedagogy, is like, well, what are we going to work on next? And that's like a really clear answer. But just to clarify, these graphs, each different shade of green is a standard deviation, right? So like if you look, for example, like I'm proud of this sixth grader. Like we started out, almost a full standard deviation below average. And then by the end of, we worked together for 4 months, and that he jumped 2.5 standard deviations within 4 months. And it was just because of getting the data. We took the MAP test in the spring, and then we took it again at the end of the spring, like right before summer. And when I got the report and the test, it's like super clear. Okay, well, this is where he's at with all these things. What do we need to work on? And it was like, we worked on it, and we did it in such a way, like we've said, that's holistic and social and emotional, has that aspect to it. And these results speak for themselves.
And I mean, this isn't the only, right? We use a lot of qualitative data, right? So we make sure that the feedback that we're giving the students, the conversations, how they're feeling, what they're learning, what they don't understand. If we see like true stress on their face, right? Like that information also really drives how our day looks and what we're teaching them and how. And there'll be some areas where we can go really fast and others where we know we have to slow down, and that's okay. So this is just kind of like a jumping off point at the beginning of the year. We're not teaching towards this. Like there is no teaching toward the test whatsoever. This is computer adaptive. We're not teaching towards this. We are making sure that the standards, which are these internationally recognized standards, that we are teaching those standards in a very applicable, practical way where they feel super successful.
We can think as teachers that we're doing the best job ever, but the MAP test is like, it's no nonsense. It's like, you're going to get a clear look at how, like at me, I feel a little nervous more than they do.
Yeah,
talking a big game. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what we've been doing. And like the MAP test is like a clear, normalized, meaning it's like all the data is compared to these like international standards, and it's adaptive. Like there's not a way to teach to it anyway, even if we wanted to.
Exactly. Yeah. So another concern that sometimes I have parents mention is, okay, so we did the pod school for a year or a couple of years, but we want to go back into a traditional setting. Can I do that? I don't know how. And the answer is a resounding yes, because our model really fosters that executive functioning skills, time management, self-advocacy, organizational habits, right? They often are better equipped to navigate those demands in a traditional setting. And we make sure that we are intentionally, like you saw with the maps, we are intentionally aligning our scope and sequence with the standard academic benchmarks, right? So we are ensuring that they are keeping up with their classmates. And often what we're seeing is that they're surpassing the classmates in a traditional school because it's so individualized, because we can focus so much attention to them and really get through a lot of material, but in a really deep way. And so just to give a quick little real world example, I recently had a student this year that it was some siblings. This model it's been great for both of them, but one of them has decided that they want to continue this model. It's been great for them, but the other one wanted to go back to a more traditional setting, and that's totally okay. What we're providing here is just an alternative to the traditional model, but we're all educators and we're really passionate educators, and we just want to make sure that children are being seen and that they're learning and that they're happy. But this student decided that they wanted to go back to traditional school. And because of this super comprehensive portfolio that we had, the MAP scores, the progress reports, the portfolio, the student got accepted no problem, and they were placed into advanced math and honors level English immediately upon entry, right? So if a family ever decides to transition back or to change pods or to just do the solo homeschooling or anything that it might be, we will support you by providing all of the documentation, super comprehensive documentation. I mean, in fact, it's more than what we get in a traditional school setting, where you usually just get like a report card with math A, science B, and that's it.
They go back to traditional school, they don't even ask for that. They're like, how old are you? Okay, you go to that room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so some questions parents ask us the most. What does Puerto Rico require to homeschool? Homeschooling is a legal right in Puerto Rico. The only thing that they require is that we have an equivalent of 180 days of school. They're not specific on how many hours you need per day, just that you comply with those days, and field trip days count as days of school. Is your curriculum accredited? No, because the accreditation actually goes to schools and institutions, not to a particular curriculum. I know that many parents that want to do homeschooling, they buy a full curriculum or they enroll their kids in like a school academia, but no state requires this. Most of them just require that you have the portfolio and that they take standardized tests. Puerto Rico doesn't require this. Like I mentioned, they only require those 180 days of school. But however, we still do the standardized test and we have the portfolio. How do I start to homeschool? All you have to do if you want to withdraw your child from a school is you send them a written letter saying that you're going to withdraw your child. And keep in mind that you should keep with you the progress report so that you can have that on your own record. Which pod is the best fit for our child? So we generally divide them by ages, but because we know that every child is unique, we also take into consideration their academics, their maturity, their personality, and the dynamics that we have in each pod. So let's say that Miss Ilana has 4 third graders and a 5th grader comes in. Well, maybe that 5th grader would work best with Nate. So these are just things that we take into consideration. Our goal is to place them in a pot where we feel like they're going to thrive the best.
I think it's worth just, saying, reiterating that part that if they work, if your children fit in with one of our pods, then that's awesome. But if not, reach out. We might be able to help you find a pod that'll work well. Or if you're a solo homeschooling parent and you need some support and you have questions, anything, reach out to us. Like we said at the top, we're not here to sell you a model or there's no pitch coming. It's literally, we're just sharing good news, essentially, of what we've been seeing, transform our children and our students' lives and their families' lives. That's why we wanted to have this talk.
And we're communicating it because we know that there's still a lot of parents in Puerto Rico that have never heard about homeschool pods. And so we just
might be scared they might be scared to do it. I know that there's a lot of should I take them out of should I take them out of traditional school? There's understandably, we were nervous to do that with our girls.
Yeah.
So where are the homeschool pods held? They're held at a hosted family that is decided by the families within that pod. I know that Miss Ilana already has a host family in Sabanera, and so do I. But both families are open to relocation if that is something that the other families decide. How much does it cost? We have a lower tuition than most private schools here in Puerto Rico, and we can also afford to have a lower tuition than many homeschooling, just because we have more students. But keep in mind that the tuition may vary between our 3 pods based on the teacher's years of experience and the needs of each pod. So if you want a specific price, you would have to message a teacher directly. And so how do we know that this model works? We did not invent this model. right? We didn't create it. It is based on a lot of research. It has been used for a couple of years, and because we've seen that it has worked, the students say it, the map shows also show it, and that's like a more objective way to see it.
So you may be asking yourself, or you might be wondering, like, is this a right fit for your child? We don't have the answer to that one, but we just encourage you, you know, like signs that maybe traditional, if your child is in a traditional school setting, signs that might not be that, you know, is that they're super stressed, that they're overwhelmed, that they are saying that they don't want to go to school, right? Like complaining about going to school is a very important sign. That's a red flag that, you know, should be addressed. Maybe it's something that's systemic in the school. Maybe it's just an individual that they're worried about, or maybe it's something larger. But those are like some really clear signs that I would encourage folks to be really sensitive to are those things. But like if you're in let's say that if you're in a homeschool, like solo homeschool setting, is a pod right for you? I think that I just want to reiterate, I think that Annelise said it really well, but that you know, we do our best. Our job as the educator leading these pods is to curate the pod and find the best fit for all involved. For the students, is it the best fit for them academically, socially? Is it a good fit for the families and the parents as far as like location and logistics and all these things? We really do our best to factor all that stuff into, you know, is my pod going to be the right fit for you and your kids and your things? I've had some families that they've reached out, they've been really motivated, but what I was offering was more structured than what they're looking for. And I've had the opposite. I've had other families be like, oh, we only are interested if you're going to use this specific curriculum. Fine, great, go as you're led. And so, you know, we do our best to kind of balance all these factors. And so that the question, is it right for you and for your child and for your family? That's really going to be best answered by you, the parent. But be looking out for those signs. Like, you know, if you're in the solo homeschooling situation, is it being rigorous enough? Are your kids getting like the social aspects that they need? I think that it's definitely possible and very beneficial, that, and a lot of parents and you know, homeschooling teachers can do that and make that happen. But if you have a doubt about it, reach out. And if you're in a traditional school model and your kid's saying that they don't want to go to school, or you see them stressed, or you see that they're just not thriving, or if you're in the situation we were in and you're paying through the nose and your kid is not learning the things that they should be learning, that's another sign, right? And so like, these are the things that I'd encourage y'all to look out for, to see if this really right fit for your child. I love these photos. I love seeing all these kids. And oh yes, then we have the testimonials here. I don't know, guys, we can let folks read them.
We can leave those there, right? So these are just like, you know, we just wanted to put some pictures and some of the testimonials from our students, and you know, some of the third graders and sixth graders, and just seeing the different activities where, you know, Puerto Rico really becomes our classroom, and there's just so much cool stuff to see here, and there's so many cool people to meet, and it really is fun to take the kids out and just, like Annelise said, like experience it and learn from it. And they talk about it forever. Like they will be like, oh, remember when we saw that, or we met this? So it really is this community that we're building. It really does become kind of like a family. These kids become, I mean, they become like our own, right? So we want them to succeed, and we are with them along the entire ride of the good days, the bad days, the, you know, the social dynamics and family issues and all of it. They know that they are in a very, very safe environment where they are not judged, where they are supported, where they are loved, where they are encouraged. And yeah, we're going to challenge them. And yeah, it's going to be hard sometimes, but all to really be able to enjoy the fruits of our labor at the end. And I think that you can see here that, you know, parents like students alike, it's been a really, really good year.
Well said.
So
Well
I
said.
think that's towards the end now. So
I mean, we take a couple seconds here we have a couple questions here from the Q&A. So this one asking what, if any, downsides are there with the pod system? There Fair question.
That's a good question.
Either of you have an answer or something that you'd want to share there? What have you seen, Ilana, especially, working with your pod? Has there been any challenges? What's been a downside?
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges is when the groups are smaller, it can kind of get a little stagnant with like how we group the kids, right? So I think this is why this model, we're expanding it, because this year it was kind of very isolated pods. Nate had his pod, I had a pod, and it was just 5 students. And so, you can only group students so many different ways before they want to work with someone different. And so we feel like in the traditional setting, well, they get a lot of exposure to a lot of different people, a lot of different teachers. And so that's why we kind of decided to expand this model so that there's a lot more kids that can come together and work in different settings. Especially having that like mentor approach where the older ones are mentoring the young ones, and where the young ones have to present to the old ones and like really have to, do their absolute best and get nervous because it's big kids. So I would say that that's one of the challenges. I think another one.
I wanted to touch. Oh, sorry. Don't go ahead.
Yeah, no, go for it.
The one that I was going to mention that touches on what you said is that doing school in the same house every single day, that can get stale too. And especially for the kids, like whichever of all the different kids in the pod, whoever's house is the host house for those kids, like there's something I think to be said. I think there's value in waking up, getting yourself ready to go out into the world every day, that, you have to brush your teeth and wash your face and comb the hair and have a breakfast and get yourself properly ready. And if kids know that they're just going to be like in their own house, it's pretty, I just have to shuffle out of bed and sit under a blanket at the table and I'm ready for school. And it's like, I think that that's been something that I've noticed of like pushing on that explicitly, like, you're not ready. Like you need to brush your teeth. Like we're sitting at the same table, please, like do me the courtesy, or like whatever the thing is of like helping push kids to like get out of that comfort zone. It quickly can become a very comfortable zone. And our job as educators is to challenge that in a healthy and respectful way, but to like stretch that, look for that zone. What do they call it? Zone of proximal development or something, of like pushing them a little bit so that it doesn't get so stale and just too easy. And like, let me just float out of bed and sit at the table. That's not ready for school either. I just wanted to throw that one in there.
Yeah. And I think one other one that I've seen too is the elective part, right? So we do a really great job at doing, the math, the science, the social studies, the language, the literacy, but then there's like the art and the PE. And so that's an area where they don't get as much exposure because, well, the day is a little short, right? So we start at 8:30, finish at 1:32. But again, that's another one of those areas that we as a team have been talking about. How do we start incorporating more of that physical education? Towards the end of my last semester, I contracted a tennis instructor to come and give tennis classes a couple days a week in the morning. So that was another way also to kind of practice these executive functions of like, we got to be somewhere at 8:45 with your tennis racket in your hat and your sunscreen and your water. And so adding that physical education component and the art component as well, I think is really important. That we're trying to incorporate more in our pods, but also can definitely be those like extracurriculars that I know parents often find, and there's a lot of them in Puerto Rico and the Lodalo area and in the metro area as well.
For sure. What do you say we take one more here and then we wrap? Does that sound all right to the team? So one other one here is, how do you feel about AI and tech in education? Right. So the use, that's a banger. I have plenty to say, but I'll wait.
Go for it, Nate. You go for it. Yeah. So you deal with it a lot more. I think Annelise and I don't deal with it as much because we're really focusing on those foundational skills. And so screen time is no time, like we'll play a Kahoot and we'll write a report on Google Docs and we'll make a presentation, but that's about the extent of it. For those first through fourth graders, third graders, since we're really focusing on those foundational skills.
I would say that every once and then, like, we still implement it. Like sometimes students will ask questions that we don't know. And we
Mhm.
go like, okay, then let's figure it out. And so I like to use AI so that I can also model the proper way to write my prop and then see the answers. And sometimes AI will answer incorrectly. And that's another way to show the students, okay, so AI is not perfect. So we use it as a tool, but we don't depend on it. We use it more to do like research, but it still needs to be guided. We are not going to give them a computer and tell them, okay, do research on AI. No.
No, you nailed it. I was going to say the same thing, that it's a tool, like technology, whether it's AI or a computer or a pencil, it's all technology. And that, like a kitchen knife, I like the analogy of a kitchen knife as far as like a really useful tool. It's helpful. You can make beautiful, delicious food with it. But if you don't know how to use it or you don't use it responsibly, it can be a murder weapon. Like, it can do a lot of damage, literally, right? As a kitchen knife. And so like AI, especially, and other types of technologies that a lot of people want to bring it into schools for a business plan. It's not because it's going to get better results from the kids. They're going to feel better, learn better, work better, or be better. It's just because it's somebody's business plan. And I think that that's a really dangerous reason to bring tech into schools. I think there was a really good researcher who just addressed Congress not long ago, not remembering his name, but it was talking about how our children is the first generation in recorded time that are underperforming their parents in school. And where they see the drop off the curve start to drop off in kids is the moment that technology is brought into schools to help with literacy, to help with math, to help a lot of these things. It's one of those areas where I want to look more in depth at that research and really see it clearly. But like in the general case, that's an indictment of like the way that we're doing things and bringing technology into schools. I've worked in schools where it was like a 1-to-1 ratio. Every single kid was expected to have a device, and it was a total disaster. We ended up with kids literally taking inappropriate photos and sharing them. It's like during school time. Like it just, it's not necessary. And like I said, like kids, these kids today are underperforming their parents, us, and so that should not be, because it was growing every other generation. And so that's I think we've gone a good amount of time here. I think we've addressed a lot of things. Thank you so much to our attendees who I still see there that are still with us here. Thank you so much for joining us. Reach out to us. We've got our contact information down here. If you're ready to see your kid thrive in an environment that's designed specifically for their success, please reach out to us. We'd love to either help you if we can, and we can start talking about if you want a spot in one of our pods, or if you want help and just being a solo parent, or if you're in a traditional setting and you've got questions, by all means, reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. Thank you very much for joining us.
If there's any other, I'll just jump in there real quick before we say goodbye. If there's any other webinars too that you would like to see, right? So if parents want to understand, well, how do I do the map testing, and how do I, you schedule them, and how do I understand them and read them, please let us know. Reach out to us, and we'd be happy to do another free webinar to give you guys the tools to be able to do it on your own, right? So we just want to make sure that that the generation that's coming up, like Nate said and Annelise said, is that they're prepared, that they're socially and emotionally resilient, that they're happy, and that they are going to be able to solve the problems of the future that we still don't know what they are, right? So we want to really, really prepare them. How we do that, there's lots of different ways to do that. It's not necessarily with us or in a homeschool pod. It could be with you, it could be in a traditional school. But if you have any questions whatsoever, please let us know. We'd be happy to do another one of these. I think this is great. Or if you do want to maybe think about joining one of our pods, please let us know. And if you're not sure where your kid might go, like you feel like, oh, maybe they're between Annelise and Ilana, or Ilana and Nate, don't worry, just reach out to one of us, and and we'll figure it out. So again, thank you so much. We're so grateful that you took some time out of your evening to be here with us, and I hope to see you soon, right? To do another one of these.
Thanks, everybody. All right, signing off.
Bye.
Bye.